You folks commissioned me to review the most random things, and I love you for it. So, continuing gradually to catch up on commissioned reviews, it's almost not embarrassing how far back they're currently backed up. It's a little embarrassing, but not as embarrassing as it used to be. This time, the Nic Cage classic, National Treasure. Now, I have, of course, seen National Treasure. I saw the sequel, too. I didn't think too much of the sequel, but I remember having fun with the original. But I also have not rewatched it in ages. So, I didn't know what I was going to get coming into this. This was fun to go back and revisit. The National Treasure is a special kind of movie. And I don't mean special as in, like, amazing, magical, praise it as the best thing ever made. I mean special as in it knows exactly what it is, but more importantly, it's not embarrassed by it. Because there are some films that you run into that seem to be embarrassed by what they are. Kind of the classic go-to example within Geeks spheres would be the original X-Men, where they're all decked out in black leather and a joke gets made. Would you rather we were in yellow spandex? In other words, the movie knows it's a comic book movie and is embarrassed by that fact. This, National Treasure, knows it's silly. And it does not care. It could not possibly care less about the fact that it is preposterously silly. Because, let's be honest, most treasure hunt stories are. I think that's part of why the treasure hunt as a genre skews young. The Goonies, Treasure Island. And it's like just a very stock plot for some eventual episode of a kids' adventure TV show or book series or what have you. Following maps to find treasure is a very fun idea, but it's an inherently very childish and very silly idea. So you don't see it as much in, I think it would be hesitant to call this adult-aimed, but more like accessible to older audiences. So it's nice to see it here because I'm a sucker for a treasure hunt. It's actually, this is going to be a weird comparison, it's actually one of the aspects I rather enjoyed about The Rise of Skywalker. For all the problems that movie had, I did enjoy the treasure hunt aspect of it, even though it made absolutely no sense and didn't fit like the history or the lore or the tone or the mood of the thing. I still kind of liked it because I just like them. And they are inherently silly, especially something like National Treasure, which is not only set in the modern day, but it's set around some of the biggest, most notable historical monuments that people know all about right now. So, you can't put this thing to logical scrutiny, because logical scrutiny, maybe nobody other than the Gates family believed and was hunting for the Charlotte, which was the first clue that is contained within the timeline of the movie. But you're telling me that all the historians and architects and scholars who went over everything on the Declaration of Independence, the building at Independence Hall, these cathedrals, all this stuff, nobody found one of the later clues and just went, that's weird. Why is there a Freemason's stamp on this brick? What? That's ridiculous. But again, it only matters if you decide it matters. The movie knows it doesn't matter. Because the fun of this is that nobody else has found it before. Logically with somebody? Yeah. So what? And Nic Cage is the perfect actor to lead a movie that knows it's silly and doesn't care, because he is an actor who is prepared to give a performance he knows perfectly well is silly and he doesn't care. He is the perfect match for this, even though, looking at the scope of the guy's entire filmography, this could probably land as one of his blander, more generic roles. But he still brings the exact right energy that needs to be brought to this. I think the scene that best exemplifies that is when Ben and Riley, so that's Nic Cage and his partner, are talking to Abigail, who's the female love interest who gets carried along, that, what it is that's going on and the situation they found themselves in. And they are trying so hard to say anything other than invisible treasure map. And they're using these euphemisms and these flowery language and these more scientific terms, but she's like, an invisible treasure map. And that scene just perfectly lays out how silly the movie knows it is, and that it is aware and is not going to let that slow it down at all. So, watching Nic Cage look for treasure while bouncing between these various major American locales or, places of import, be it the Capitol and the Declaration of Independence, which is key to a big part of the thing, be it Philadelphia and Independence Hall, be it in New York on Wall Street, all these things. It's just fun to see it bounce around. And there's a shocking amount of accurate history sprinkled throughout, which I think, that's just not something I would necessarily expect from something this silly that knows it's this silly. It's like, no, if we're going to drop, tidbits of real history, let's actually have it be real. So, there's these, and it never stops and feels like a lecture, because it's the knowledge of these things that connects the dots of the clues and allows the heroes to keep going. So, it never feels like it's going, stop, educate the audience. No, instead, they just rattle these things off randomly, and things like the Silence Do-Good letters, which were these letters written by Ben Franklin under a pen name pretending to be a widow. And, this is real. This, the treasure isn't real, the clues aren't real, but all the little tidbits they drop about who was a Mason and, the Liberty Bell details and who built this and when, it's all accurate. And that's, they didn't even have to, but they did. And that just makes it more fun to me, because it says that while they don't care that it's silly, they do care about keeping it as authentic as something the silly can be. It's funny, I started it up and I over 2 hours. God, this is gonna slog by the end, isn't it? One of the things I'm gonna say in the review is that it's too long. It's really not. It keeps a good pace, despite its runtime, despite the fact that it's kind of at about the same level all the way through, but it's just, it has that propellant momentum that a good treasure hunt does. So that keeps the thing moving, even as it is about, I would say, about a half hour longer than I would ideally say this kind of adventure movie should be. And it still works. And the actors are all game for this. I mentioned Nic Cage, and of course we have Sean Bean as the villain with his slightly long blonde hair. It's a weird look for him, but he's charming, and I love a charming villain. And I especially love a villain who's charming, not because they're necessarily trying to deceive people. He portrays Nic Cage in the beginning, but the charm isn't necessarily an act. He is a charming guy who is also the bad guy. So, that's the energy he's bringing to this. Jon Voight does a good job, very convincing as the sort of, oh god, this treasure nonsense again, father figure for Nic Cage. My personal thoughts about Jon Voight aside, he does very well in this role, and it just does a really good job capturing the feeling of adventure. Adventure is something that I enjoy a lot, and is kind of nebulous and difficult to pin down. You can just look at how vague terminology like action adventure or adventure games are in the video game space and realize that it's not that much better in book and TV and movies, but it's just a feel. It's just a vibe that certain kinds of stories give off, and a good treasure hunt, to me, always has that adventure vibe. And this absolutely has it. And this was just a lot of fun to go back and revisit. And there's so many weird little touches, like stealing the Declaration of Independence, which honestly could have been half the movie. Plotting that, and it could have just been the map itself, but no, it's connecting to more clues, da-da-da-da-da. But I love that we actually kind of have competing heists. We're watching Ben and Riley, gear up and try and figure out how to steal this thing at the same time that Sean Bean's character and his crew are being prepared to do it much more flatly and bluntly, prepared to break in and have no finesse, but they're both tooling up for this heist. And I can't, there have to be other movies that are out there, things that are out there that are basically competing heists. Other than the Halloween episodes of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But that's just such a fun idea. Because first of all, a heist is another thing I'm a sucker for. And so the idea of two different competing heist crews converging on the same thing at the same time, I kind of do want a movie where that's the entire movie. But even as only a part of it here, that's a lot of fun. And I enjoy that. I had totally forgotten Harvey Keitel was in this. Also bringing the right vibe, bringing just the right sense of authority to the FBI role that he has. This is just a good time. And it has held up surprisingly well. And I don't say that again, trying to mark it out as some kind of masterpiece, but as fun as you remember it being, it's still that fun. National treasure. Have you rewatched it lately? You should. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. I got that Patreon, which is how you can commission me to review things. And these days, I might even get to it in less than a year. Hey! But no pressure on that. The like, share, subscribe, they also help me out. But no pressure on that either. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break.